So I'm hoping not to use my computer today. I will take notes so that we will have some notes of this meeting to post on the website for people who don't want to
Perfect.
use the whole.
Were you included on Robin's email? She's just gonna be late on Zoom.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I didn't know if it was Zoom or not, but she did say, yeah.
Yes.
And I said, don't worry, I'm taking notes, except do I have a pen?
Can get you one if you don't have.
I do not. What a dodo. Susie the dodo. Anybody got a pen I can mooch?
Sure.
Look, see?
Oh,
See?
he's got one.
This is a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
I have another one too.
See?
To it.
There we go.
You guys are
I
a
like
planning
it.
committee.
I
It's
like
very
it.
clear right now.
Always have to carry a spare pen, you never know.
Yes. Dab somebody.
Oh,
We're not recording yet, are we?
it might be.
Oh.
I have been setting things as automatically recording, so I
Yep.
forget.
Okay.
Sorry, we had a lot of people joining via Zoom, so I
Oh,
wanted
do
to
we? Yeah.
start
yeah.
it soon.
Yeah, no,
Well, I mean, I guess Leslie is joining via Zoom.
absolutely.
Um,
And Joe is.
yeah, and then I knew Robin, so I
Yeah.
just didn't want to leave anyone hanging.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn them. Do you guys want the lights on or no?
I like some lights.
Yeah.
A little bit of lights.
No.
Mood lighting.
There you go. Oh, that's better. Yeah.
Only 1:30, 25. Leslie Workshop.
Really enjoyed Suzanne's reading. She was amazing.
It went off a lot better than I thought it was gonna go.
Is that right?
Yeah,
No, it was.
all of them.
Oh, yes, they were all.
With
but
Joe,
she- but-
When
but-
they
but-
started, it wasn't very fun.
Promoted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Definitely.
And there was concern that
Yeah.
people wouldn't.
Yeah.
Wouldn't laugh, and it was, they were hysterical, so it's okay.
Oh, her accent.
Yeah, but she had fun.
You know how to do that. I don't need to
Yeah.
tell
We
you.
listened to a lot of Ingrid Bergman
So is it?
Yeah.
as preparation.
That's what she said, yeah.
Yes,
No, it showed. I mean,
she has a gift for accents,
Joe.
so.
Hello,
she
Joe.
displayed that very well. my
Now,
wife
do you have to
thoroughly-
leave early,
Bill
Joe?
And everybody.
I'm sorry?
To leave early? No?
Yes, 5:15, 5:20 at the latest.
Okay, okay.
He's a busy guy.
He's a busy guy. That's good, but you're here for most of it, and I think, Andy is coming, but he's gonna be a little late. So we'll get started as soon as we have our consultant in the house. Right, we have. Code. Oh, look at this little piece of rubbish. Who has it going on today? Yes. I should open it up to parking. Article 9.
I found it interesting reading your email that was sent out about all the
Yeah.
comments.
Yeah,
And the planning board's gonna decide on this and the planning board's gonna decide on that. And oh, by the way, the planning board
yeah,
planning board's got a lot of work to do.
they do.
They do. Yeah. Be planning worse than any of those emails.
No, but you and Mark are gonna send it out to them.
Did we
Mark-
discuss? Oh, okay.
I forwarded it to you and Mark, and I said, would you
Thank you.
please?
That's
as
yours.
Mark, as you
Saving it for you.
suggested, let's send this out to the planning board and select board so that they know who's getting what, in case they will get calls from constituents and
No,
say,
great. Call, great. I'm just chuckling because I feel like I read one of your emails and didn't pay attention.
yeah. Mine is so fat. Why is yours so fat? I don't want.
Is yours double sided?
Are you double-sided?
Oh, it's the non-red line version.
It is, but
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah.
Is it double sided? Because hers
Yeah,
isn't.
no.
But mine is double-sided, but it's red line, so it has a lot of extra business. in
Okay,
it.
yeah, mine's not that bad.
It's bad. Come on, Leslie, where are you?
Just checking my email to make sure she.
So So early.
Sure, whenever you need to leave, you just will note it in the minutes.
Too many simultaneous meetings.
Well, I spoke with her earlier today, so she's certainly planning on being here.
Okay.
I haven't received any emails, so I'm using Zoom links, so. She seemed rather busy, so she might just be. Or 2 weeks.
Okay. Yep. 4:02. Oh, wait. Nice to know you still wear a watch.
Of course.
I haven't worn a watch ever since I got a phone.
Yeah, me too.
I don't use a watch anymore because it's always right here.
Connected to
The watch.
I was gonna say, once you get one of these, it swings right back around.
Yeah.
Coming back around, his son and all his buddies, he's been starting makeup for his friends.
Is that right?
School and-
Yeah.
and so they're coming back.
Yeah,
It's nice because you're like, oh, if you have one of these, like you're a bit connected, but you're not quite, like you can't do things on it.
oh, there she is.
Oh, there she is, thanks.
Excellent. I was just wondering if she was thinking a different time, like central time.
No, I think we like specifically said.
Yeah.
Eastern when we got up earlier.
Hello, Leslie.
Can I just have 1 minute? Okay.
As you need.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Let's go in twos. The blackboard, it's the one that wrote support letters, yeah.
For the folks on Zoom, if you're wondering what's being passed around, this is a letter of thanks from the Bike Ped Committee to CPIC for our letter of support for their grant, which I'm curious if it's being held up and impounded or not, but we'll see. I think it was a good application. Who knows how competitive it was, but they appreciated our doing it. What is that funny little thing? Hello, Leslie.
So sorry. So sorry. I was talking to Kirk and I couldn't get to hang up.
It's so good.
No.
A long time.
Yeah. How are y'all?
I think we're good. I think we're sort of, we've been coming through a little bit of a lull after a kind of an intensive set of feedback. And we just yesterday sent out an email to people who individually commented on the code, either specific aspects of the code or general, just giving them appreciation for being part of this round. And I think I see this workshop today as possibly putting this draft to bed, getting ready for the next draft. So we're kind of at a nice milestone that we thought was going to happen 2 years ago. But we're still hanging in together. And I'm assuming, most of us, I think, sat through in person the developers workshop, which was really quite well attended. And thank goodness was recorded, because, no amount of notes can really capture the sentiment in the room. And even though it takes time to listen to all of that, I think it probably gives you a good perspective on some of and there was a brand new participant, you know, in terms of commenting on the code, and it's always nice to sort of get new eyes on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we're kind of in your hands in terms of, you know, we're hoping that you can help us resolve some of these things where, you know, they're just little sticking points.
Yes. So Sky and I had a good conversation this morning.
Yeah.
And I did watch the meeting on 1.5 speed, which didn't really take it didn't really make it last less long. It was very hard to watch and not be able to respond. But yeah, and then I did have to kind of rewind and listen to a couple of things again, but Sky's notes were really good. And I actually had I actually took some notes myself, and I feel like pretty much everything was noted. Except for I do have one question, Sky, I meant to ask you this morning. Are you guys going to use general code to put everything up online? I know that there was a comment about that.
I mean, gosh, I think so.
Okay.
I don't know if I have
It's so just I guess you probably, well, I don't know. Do you guys, CPIC members, do you remember this conversation, or was this a conversation that
I
okay.
think there was a little bit of a conversation toward the end of the workshop where people said, you know, make it easy for us, like put it online and let us just, and I didn't know really what that meant. You know, like,
Yeah,
what do you
I'm
want?
not remembering that.
Um,
Well, because we had talked, I think, so Leslie, when we were doing our scoping, we talked about like our code managing. Is that, like, that's what
Yeah.
hosts are, what our hosts are code right now is E-code, which I think is general code.
E-code
no?
36, yeah.
Yeah.
E-code is general code, and general code has it's a little bit more expensive for them to create the online version, but to do the center zones, they take my InDesign document and replicate it online, as
Okay.
opposed to just cutting the text out and just dropping it in and sticking the images in somehow. It's very nice the way that they do it. It's the best code.
Yes.
I'm so glad that you guys have them, because they are the best way to get this type of code online.
Yes, yeah, we use them, and we have the extra money required for that budgeted
Okay.
next year.
Oh, okay. That's what I was that's all that I wanted to say is you got to get it budgeted, because it just seems like
No, thank you. I already got it.
it falls through the cracks and nothing. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I mean, Julie was the one who had initially done that, so she was the reason I knew to get it in this year's budget, but it is in this year's budget, and we have an up-to-date quote, that's the word. But thank you for checking, yes.
Good.
Great. So what I did was I've kind of got all these bullet lists, and I tried to kind of break them out. And I think that there's a few topics. I don't know, did you already talk about this while I was not on, Sky? Okay,
No.
so
We talk about content of this meeting.
yeah. And I'm sorry I didn't do one of my famous agendas, but I just didn't. I really just haven't had time to. I had, in terms of watching the meeting and then kind of interpreting everything. But I do think that there were some topics that were brought up in the meeting that we should just sort of table for this call, because either they're not specific to the Topsham Center zones, or they require Kirk to be involved, or I think it's mostly just sort of the way they didn't read the section. So those topics are anything use related, and this is mostly probably Marilyn's comments that she had about the industrial uses in the LI zone.
Okay.
Nonconformity, which is not that it's not in the back of my mind about how, because I want to talk to you about how we sort of transition the mall area. But in general, nonconformities and like the percentage of, additional additions that people can do before they have to meet the code, or how all that is. I just want to kind of table that because Kirk really needs to be involved in that conversation. And then the MPD stuff, the master plan development stuff, I think that those comments that they made are the same comments that they made a couple of other times before. And I feel pretty strongly that they're addressed in the draft. Like, it very clearly in the draft says that engineering drawings are not required. The sentence says engineering drawings are not required, I think. And there may be some wording that they didn't like about, the proposed method of managing, their actual implementation. And Sky is going to read that whole section and mark it up so that, we can just address any of that. So I don't think we really need to talk about it.
Okay.
However, there are some aspects of the MPD that I think would help with the transition for the mall. And I think that that's probably our biggest conversation. What I'd like to hear from you all in terms of modifying the code, I have some recommendations for how we can manage the mall area, but I also want to hear from you all how we get from the vision, how strongly you feel about maintaining the vision that's in the comp plan, and what you would be willing to accept in terms of phasing into the comp plan. So that's one topic. And then there's some just design questions that were brought up. Some of the design standards, like, do we want to manage roofs? I think we do. Because I think it gets us a lot, and I can explain that, but that was a question. The building segmentation, the building segments was a question, and I think you just didn't read it. And I think the half story was a question, which, I think we can talk about with the roofs. And then underground parking and mechanical equipment.
And where to put it. Yeah.
And the mechanical equipment section is pretty detailed. I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. I was looking
She's
at
gonna
something.
let you share.
If you don't have permissions, let me know. Nope, you should be good.
All right.
I do. Zoom changed, and I need to make you guys bigger, so hopefully I don't lose the share. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, so there's a whole section. I don't understand why the bookmarks aren't working. Oops. So there's 3 columns of text about locating mechanical equipment, and then some images. And we just talked about the fact, Sky and I talked this morning about the fact that this not allowed is like freaking them out.
Yeah.
And, we want to maybe soften some of that language. But I will also kind of go back through all of this and soften it. Our goal of this section, in my opinion, is to make sure that everybody's thinking about all of this mechanical equipment before they design the building and lay out the site, so that if the transformers have to be in this particular place, or there is some gigantic utility box that they don't have control over and it has to be located here, that they don't like put a courtyard in front of that or something like that, so that they just know where it is, and they're thinking about it and managing it. I have just found that if you don't put fairly strong language, then they just ignore it. If you just make them design guidelines, then they just ignore it and they don't actually do that. And it has made, I've had people tell me that if out of everything in the code, this was their favorite section because it sort of holds their feet to the fire about it and makes them like, hire the MEP, the mechanical, electrical plumbing engineer early on to figure out where all the stuff is going to go and how it's going to lay out on the facade and, and all that, as opposed to designing the building, then hiring the engineer, then trying to retrofit all of this stuff onto the building.
Yeah.
Joe is smiling.
So Leslie, did I hear you say as your focus here on, this is section 840, and you said that you're gonna soften the language, but not a lot. I mean, you're not gonna compromise so much that you lose what you're aiming to achieve. Yeah, nodding, and there's Joe's hand. I was hoping I'd see a Joe hand.
Well, I just wanted to comment that one of the things that I remember that was pointed out was the fact that the developers have very little flexibility with respect to CMP and their transformer units. And maybe a simple statement about this is required with the exception of, utility regulations or what, I don't know the verbiage, but that was one of the things that I recall.
Yeah, it actually says except when no other option exists with approval by the code enforcement administrator, so that officers. So there's already some of that language to give them more flexibility in there. I think they were looking at the pictures and seeing it said not allowed and not reading the text.
That's a lot easier than reading the text.
Yeah. So, and short of putting a label on every image that says, please read the associated text, I don't, know that we're going to get away from that, but yeah. And just taking away the, putting some more explanation on these images so that it's not quite so shocking. But yeah, I hear you. And I know that. I know the developers don't think I know that, but I do know that. I mean, I've dealt with it enough but anyway, so that was just the mechanical equipment. I don't feel like we need to. You'll have an opportunity to review it when I'm done.
Sounds good.
Leslie, one other comment that I wanted to see if you could touch on or weigh in on is there was one related to some of the dimensional and frontage line, building on the frontage line, in particular on properties that are not really conducive to building. For example, I think the example in the meeting was the Sherwin-Williams site where the parcel actually goes down the hill and into the gully. So are you actually using a percentage of the full
buildable
property or the buildable limits per se? I don't know if you remember that comment from the meeting or not.
My interpretation of that comment was that that's the wrong. Right. Was that they were. I thought that this kind of area was more about calculating the 6 acres for the MPD.
No.
It had to do with it was more a question of, if this were a very urban area where the lot sizes are geometric and well-defined and, boxy shape, versus if you get into a piece of property here where the property boundary extends, down a gully or is, long and narrow, that the proportions just don't work anymore.
Oh, calculating the street frontage. Yes. Yeah, I think that's actually in the measuring section already, but I'll double check it, or it is in my most recent code. So I'll double check that and yeah, we can look at that. It's interesting because actually that directly relates to what part of what I wanted to talk about um in this area, that
Okay.
they seem
perfect.
to be super focused on the frontage requirements,
Yep.
and the percentage of frontage. And I just want to say that I think that part of, and we talked about this at one time, I think part of it is triggered by Thompson Fair Mall being the front street.
Yep.
And I think we said at one point that, well, I think if the mall area were to redevelop, and I know that it's a bunch of different parcels, but if it were to redevelop, then it would be a master plan site, and they would come in and they would, they would lay it out as a master plan site. And one of the things that they might do is take these entrance roads and turn them into front streets that are perpendicular to Topsom Fair Mall Road.
Uh-huh.
And I actually think that's the answer to most of their concerns, is that we need to give them more flexibility about what they're treating as the front.
Main Street, okay. Yep. Huh,
And it's always been in the code. It's just that I was sort of relying on their creativity to use the tools in the code to get them where they needed to go. And that's just not, I think, for the, for people that do this on a regular basis, they're not thinking like that. And so I think we need to maybe guide them a little bit more towards this. So what I was thinking of doing was and I really, this really does have to do with the kind of the frontage and the gully, and I'll show you in just a minute. Is in this section up here at the very beginning of the Topsom Center zones, we talk about the definition of front streets. It's on page 2-6, so it's 2.50.1. And it defines Topsom Fair Mall Road as a designated front street where the fronts of lots should be.
yeah,
And I think what we should do here is add in some allowances for how they can choose what their front street is. And one of those options would be to, short of these being treated as actual streets, which I firmly believe they should, but I don't know that that's ever going to happen, but they could use these kind of perpendicular defined ways, and I could even map them. Although I was talking to Sky, I'm a little bit concerned about us getting too far master planning the mall site, which I don't want to do. But they could use these as their front, which would give them shorter frontages. So like, for example, when Kurt said, oh, I've got a 200-foot frontage along Topsom Fair Mall Road, he could turn it and use the shorter frontage as his front. And I think it would be fine. I think it would actually create a nicer walking environment if people were walking off of Topsom Fair Mall Road anyway. So that would be one way of giving them more flexibility. And really, when you look at these side streets too, they could do it that way. I mean, I don't know if they're gonna, I can hear Dan saying, well, no, we want the front to be Topsom Fair Mall Road because you can see it, but I think they can still do that. but then like, for example, here, you know, this could be I mean, it's got a path, and it could be a nice sort of walking street, much nicer than Topsom Fairmall Road.
Yeah,
Right, just allow the flexibility to choose which is the front street.
Can I ask a quick question about that? I agree with that. I think that's a good idea. But I have liked that we have the front streets designated in 2.50, just because, it felt good that, Main Street was designated as one. And so I'd be curious if you would be, Leslie, interested in having, like, if this would just be something that's only allowed in, shoot, I forget the real name of this zone, the Topsom Fairmall 1.
Yeah, yeah.
Or Topsom Fairmall 2, because I don't know if we'd want that on Main Street. Maybe that's something to discuss for the board, but, that was my first thought is, oh, you know, this works great in Topsom Fairmall. Would it be appropriate elsewhere or no? That was where my gut went. And sorry if I tried
Yes.
to, I didn't need to.
No, no, I think if you look at so if you look at this sort of specific layout of zones in the NPD on page 2-33, which I realize doesn't apply to any of these sites because they're not NPDs, but there is some language in here about a new perpendicular street to 196 is another option that could be used for the location of these nodes. And so that's the same kind of idea. The only thing about Main Street is it really needs to occur on a deep enough parcel to like establish a real frontage. But I will look at that. I will certainly look at that. I think, hi, Andy. Oh, I'm going back to this. I think that we always thought that that was going to happen here anyway, eventually, or at least I was. And so I just think that if we're going to, you know, if they're going to plug in these sort of incremental developments onto this whole area, if we could plug them in a way that eventually they can connect up, if that ever happens, that would be great. So it's sort of like baby steps towards the comp plan vision for the area.
and you know, I don't remember if there were specific parcel examples, but I remember a couple of different people talking about that, you know, percentage of frontage and, you know, required, that it was way too much. And when, especially for a restaurant where you just want to guide people to one entrance and not have to have multiple entrances and confuse people and blah, blah, blah. So I'm just wondering if this, you know, giving and guiding toward the other option of having a different front street may do the trick. And, you know, at least it offers that flexibility. I don't know if it would be enough, but it sounds like a good move to me. Joe, what's on your mind?
I just want to make sure that I thought there were two parts to Rick's question. One, what had to do with the fact that a certain percentage of the lot, the Sherwin-Williams lot, falls off into a ravine. And Rick, did I understand correctly that you wanted to clarify how the buildable area was being defined and whether it was being defined as the entire lot regardless of the topography?
For the NPD calculation, yes. But I think what I believe Rick was referring to is that if we're calculating the frontage, say, of this parcel, and if we were going to say that now Midway Drive is the A street that this person, you know, say they're going to redevelop, let's use this. Say they're going to redevelop this, and we're suggesting that they use Midway as their front street. How do we calculate the street wall when, well, this isn't a good one, when it is going down? It's a longer lot line. And so in the measuring section, there should be something that allows you to remove that sort of steep slope site or a heavily wooded site that you're not going to build in. Unbuildable areas is usually how it's defined. And I'll fold that. If it's not in there, I'll fold it in. Because I feel like these are some things that we've done over the past couple of years, but this code was written before then. And so, yeah. If we are using this as a front street, then that helps, because what it's doing, is making that frontage shorter, because in almost every situation it's shorter.
Right,
But
that's the perfect example, and
Yeah.
that addressed both parts of the question.
Yeah.
The measurements, you eliminate the unbuildable portion, and actually, the place you just picked out there, Mom's Motorsport Place, the main entrance is on, if you call the front street, that is where the
Midway.
main entrance is on Midway, and it's done exactly what we're describing. And addresses both concerns that were raised in that comment. Perfect.
Okay, so Andy,
Yeah, good afternoon. I guess my thought on this was Dan being a developer, I'll just use Dan's name, but I thought his concern was if he's got a lot that's 400 feet wide, he's got to build a building a certain minimum width. And what if that doesn't fit what the buyer wants? What if it doesn't fit? It doesn't fit the idea of you're forcing someone to build a building a certain minimum width when it doesn't meet what the people that want to buy the lot want to build there. I mean, isn't there some flexibility in that? Leslie, help me.
sure. So I think that's kind of what we've been talking about here. And I think, first of all, I went through and I kind of measured, because these parking lots are all broken up into separate parcels.
Yeah.
And I didn't finish all my measuring, but for the most part, they've been broken up, and there isn't anything that's super, super long. Like 200 feet is, the length. And so you would then have to do a building. But part of what we're talking about here is trying to give them some other options for choosing what's the most appropriate frontage. But I do think we need to kind of take, and I have some other options and some other items to address that I'll get to. But what I'd like to do is take a bit of a step back, because my main question for you all is that the goal still of this area? The comprehensive plan called for this area as a whole to move towards walkable, park once, and having these sort of walkable areas, and moving the sort of developments closer together so you don't have to walk all the way across the parking lot to get to another use. And I think I need some verification from you all that is still a goal, because if it's not, then everything else that we're going to talk about is sort of moot.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that, because I can't see in the next 30 years this mall redeveloping into a walkable. I'm not saying it isn't a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying I don't see it happening. I really don't. I don't see that. I mean, it's been that way, and there's new buildings that have been constructed, and the parking. I'm saying we're going to get there, and it's very, very, very slow. But I don't know.
I want to show you.
I've been thinking about this for some time, and it seems to me that Topsham Fair Mall Road, I hate to use the phrase lost cause, but it is so it's not fully developed, but it certainly is close to fully developed, that stretch of it. And you know, if that were allowed to be in some way, if we were demanding less of Topsham Fair Mall Road, it would be fine by me, and I think it makes sense.
All right,
So I
let's
just
have,
want
I just want others to weigh in if you have strong or weak thoughts here. Just weigh in. My thinking is it's very hard, even if you're a developer, I think, to envision something 15, 20, 30 years down the road that looks quite different than what we have now. But that doesn't mean it's not gonna happen, or can't happen, or shouldn't happen. And I think the line that we're trying to walk is between holding on to an ambitious vision and letting it go completely. Clearly, there are some people who would like to just have the current way of operating continue, because that's what they're used to. I'm hoping that we can find some middle ground that offers the kind of flexibility and yet has some incentives toward something that will look quite different after we're all, or some of us, are gone. So any thoughts?
Susan, do you, are you saying, how can I put this? Are you looking for a middle ground for Topsham Fair Mall Road, or for the entire Topsham Center Zone?
No, just the Topsham Fair. I think the
Okay.
Topsham Fair
Okay.
Mall.
Because I really think it's a different animal than anywhere else in town.
It is, and I think, I hear what you're saying, Joe. And at the same time, I keep remembering hearing Leslie talk about, I can see this looking very different in 15 or 20 years. But I think we're in a peculiar economy where there's nervousness for probably lots of good reasons.
Yeah.
And I think we have to respect that. So just before, because I think Leslie's asking kind of a pivotal question that we ought to at least wrap ourselves around for a second. And if you don't have strong feelings, that's fine, but I think weigh in on that question if you can.
Well, let me jump back in because I haven't heard anybody else, but real quick, we got to make sure that something that will happen. I mean, just because we want it to happen doesn't mean it's going to. It has to, in just like anything, change is going to hurt. So there's got to be some change, but how much? That's, I think, really what Leslie's saying. How much do you guys want to get? You want to go all in? You want to go part in? What do you want to do? And that's the hard decision that we have to make. But I think that's ultimately the question. If we hold the line and nothing happens because it's not feasible from a marketing end, from a use end, then we've cut our own feet off. But if we can find a middle ground, which I think we're working towards, is a middle ground, which I find acceptable.
Andy, let me just ask you a question, because I know you came in a little bit late. Did you hear the stuff, the discussion that Leslie was offering around, some of the developers are very concerned about frontage. And she's offering to have a different front street, right? To have.
I understand that. I
Yeah.
understand that. Yeah.
So that offers some flexibility that hadn't emerged before. So you can have a much smaller frontage with your single entrance that will make people happy and still sort of preserve the walkability factor.
I don't know, and I heard that, and I'm okay with that. I guess I didn't, maybe I missed, have you talked about parking lots in front of the building?
Not yet.
At
Not yet.
all, as opposed to access in the back? That's, okay, that's
Yeah,
a
we'll
bigger
get there.
Okay,
So,
Any
So I
other
just-
comments? Yeah, okay, carry on, Leslie.
well, I just want to show you an example of what's being done in these kind of mall areas. And this one is just the only one that, I mean, there are lots of other ones. This is an old mall. You can see the like department stores on the side with a kind of central mall. So, and, surrounded by a literal sea of parking.
Yeah.
And, this is a new, so you would enter this through, you're entering into a parking lot. And just along this one old parking lot, they developed this.
Huh.
And you can see the mall at the end. You know what I mean? There, it's being phased. But it's a really nice development just plopped in the middle of this parking lot, but it's lovely.
I agree with you, Leslie. Give us the opportunity to do this, but don't make us have to do it. We
But
would
see,
love to do that.
the problem is if you just allow the parking lots to constantly be drive-throughs and fast foods, and you're locating them in the middle, then you'll never get there. You'll
I
never
don't think
get
so.
there.
I think society's gonna bring us right to where you are right there. I wonder did they mandate that there? Or did that develop on its own? We don't know. I don't know, but I love that concept, and I think you'll
I
see
think-
that.
Yeah, it's happening because malls are dying. And so the owners of the malls are looking for ways to add housing to, influence and maybe tear down the mall eventually. They're tearing down, a lot of times they'll tear down, the inside and leave some of the bigger pieces. So, this whole sort of mall retrofit thing has been going on for a long time, but I'm just seeing it happen more on a minor infill method lately. And so I just wanted to say that, if you keep seeing Topsham Fair Mall like it's never going to change, it most certainly can. And I think it's just, we need a little bit of guidance to make sure that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater at some point. As long as you keep developing plopping new buildings, if we can plop them in the right place, eventually you can connect them, or you can create, when you have a side yard parking next to a building that's built up to a sidewalk, maybe the sidewalk's not along Topsham Fair Mall Road, maybe it's along the drive into the mall, and it's got parking next to it. Eventually you can build a building in that parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so just kind of getting that incremental development into the framework of the code would help us move in that direction. And I do think that to some degree, it's already happening. And you can see like this Panera, has a nice kind of frontage.
It does.
And, it's got the outdoor seating, and I can see this being treated, if it were, maybe you do have a parking lot next to it, and then maybe the next one, has a similar treatment. You can then, start to see that framework being filled in, and you can put an Olive Garden in there, but it's just going to still fit within the framework.
So I just want to ask this question of Andy, because it's important that we have you with us, Leslie, for this. When I
I was gonna
hear,
say, it's important that we have Andy with us.
yes, both sides, but I think that we want to listen to and honor the concerns of the developers. The thing that I'm hearing, I think repeatedly, is that they are working in the same basic framework that they are used to. And what I heard Leslie just say is that malls are dying. I haven't heard any of them actively, openly acknowledge hey, malls are dying and we have to do something different. And maybe this code will help us do something different, but we want the flexibility to do the something different in ways that we will know how to do. So
Yeah, I don't see this as a mall per se. This is, this is very different than that. I see over time, I mean, basically the market's gonna dictate what you can get in there, what you can build and what's gonna be attractive to build in there. And as you can already see, I mean, if you're talking about, is it gonna change in 30 years? Well, 25 years ago, you did not have the car wash, the Panera, the
that's right.
Highbrow and Jersey Mike's. And over time, you're gonna get smaller buildings in there and then eventually they'll connect as it gets denser. And it's not gonna be walkable per se until it gets dense enough to the point where they're getting closer together.
Okay, I have a
It's
really,
gonna happen naturally over time is the point.
I have an ignorant question, because I should know this and I don't. In Topsom Fair Mall 1, are we allowing housing?
In the
Good.
upper stories.
That's what I thought. And so we would not allow it on the, like, the thing that you just showed on the entrance road on both sides, that beautiful housing development to that mall. I mean, we don't have that particular problem with the 360 parking lots around a mall. But, if there were an appropriate location for an apartment building within that Topsom Fair Mall 1, without having retail on the ground floor, are we allowing that?
I'm gonna say, unfortunately, yes. And let me explain myself.
Yep,
Yeah, so the commercial mixed use zone allows pretty much everything in it.
Yeah.
Row houses and apartment buildings. I think it's a mistake. This was a previous guidance
yeah,
that was changed. And I think that it's dangerous is what it is, because it doesn't manage how it all fits together. Ideally, what I would say is, in a location like this, make it mixed use where you build commercial just like you would today, and then they would use the master plan development language to add other building types, but they have to do a mini master plan that says this is going to work this way. But right now, somebody can come and do an apartment building pretty much anywhere in the parking lot.
Hmm.
And I don't have faith that, it would be good. Because, what I was showing you was guided by the planners for the city.
Yeah.
And they made this is a walkable pedestrian way, then the parking is all, in the back behind all of this. This is parking behind it. And they very consciously made this sort of, entrance way to what is going to eventually be something else here. Walkable with on-street parking so people can park there, but it was very consciously designed to be that way.
Yeah. Where is that, Leslie?
Naperville, Illinois. The only
Illinois.
reason I brought it up is because I just found it. I was at a meeting in the suburbs early, and I was just driving around seeing what was new going on, and I wandered upon it.
The area population is more than the state of Maine probably there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I mean, these are on par with what you would see developed in or at least part of it in your, the old
Well, Well,
military
a
housing.
good
Sorry.
example, I think, Leslie, would be the Portland Mall and the Bangor Mall. Both of those are old, worn-out malls that are actually look somewhat similar to the footprint you're talking about. They're much larger um, footprint. You know, you've got the vacant lot across the street from what we call the Crooker lot. I mean, that can be master planned, so that's a little bit different. You're going to be able to you know, put housing in the back end and meet different requirements and have some mixture of uses and stuff. But and I could see this the Hannaford store. Is that always going to be a Hannaford? I don't know. I'd be surprised if both Hannaford and Market Basket always stay there. Say, and I'm not knocking Hannaford, but what should say they say, okay, we've got our other stores somewhere else. We give up this battle. Let's put housing in here. I want that opportunity. I would think if I was the owner, I would want that opportunity to do that. And I would think that I probably would want to have retail on the first floor. But I guess I'd have to test the market and see to make sure it would work.
Or
Not be
maybe I'm part of it.
Give me some flexibility. Give me a little bit of flexibility is what I think you're going to hear the Jim Howards of the world say.
Question.
Yeah. So like if you look, one of the other tools that I was discussing, so in addition to other frontage allowances, is this, somebody mentioned that this was such a great idea, this circulator pat route. And this very much matches the Boulevard Street that's in the MPD. It's like laid out exactly like this. I mean, I probably would have flipped the parking, but I think it works really well this way. And if you notice, all three of these buildings are kind of built that way. This one is behind some parking, but they kind of line up. And so if that could be retained and continued, then it would sort of be the frontage to Topsom Fair Mall Road. And I think allowing that to be treated as the front street and having your build to zone measured off of that makes makes a lot of sense. And again, it's consistent with what we laid out in the NPD. Do you know what I mean? Is that the right term? I feel like every community it's named something different. Do you know what I mean when I say NPD?
I do.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's hard to envision that in the Topsom Fair Mall, but it's because I think of a MPD as vacant land, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my mind around it. And Sky had a comment.
I just was curious. So you said something that was intriguing to me, and we didn't touch on it earlier, which is why I have the question right now. Are you suggesting that in that you could see one way of handling this area is to, maybe cover your ears, Andy, I'm just joking, is to tighten the restrictions in some way towards what's allowed building type wise, because you said that you were concerned by all the types that were allowed, but then to use the master, and correct me if I'm wrong, and to use the master plan district as a means of flexibility, as like an opt-in, you can do that and you can get more flexibility, or did I misunderstand you? I think I misunderstood you.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I'm trying to pull out, because there's this nobody wants to use the master plan development unless they have to, kind of a thing.
Right.
And we've already made it bigger, so it wouldn't necessarily get triggered by some of these parcels in the mall area. And I don't foresee the mall owner ever wanting to do the master plan development. I'm suggesting that we pull some of the elements in it and apply it already, or give and it's meant to be more flexible. It's meant to say, you can choose which frontage, but we're giving you more options for that frontage, which I think I always assumed would be utilized. It's just that it's not laid out in black and white. It requires you to sort of think about the whole code and know it like I do, and nobody's doing that. So
Right.
what I'm suggesting is that we pull some of those things out, like the frontage road and the perpendicular streets, which can be private, and plug those in as, allowances for the frontage. And I have other recommendations too, but those are just a couple of the first ones that I think would get us a lot further towards you know, and using these existing buildings already that are fairly well done, you know, like I think except for this stupid circular drive-through that everybody thinks we have to have all the time. The Jersey Mike's is pretty good too. So, you know, and I think we could consider a similar situation here because, you know, you've got the drive. If this would have been, and I'm sure your transportation planner said, no, let's put the entrance way down here instead of putting it here across from this, but it would have been perfect if it aligned all the way across and you had this sort of frontage road on this side as well. However, when I say that, there are design standards associated with that frontage road in order to be sure that it has street trees and sidewalks, so it's walkable and not just, you know, a parking lot. So there's a little
Leslie,
bit of give and take there.
have we kind of responded to that? You put out the main question here, which is, you know, what is our major goal and where are we wanting to come down between the vision and the plan and where we end up? And I think you've heard a couple of different positions on that, you know, volume control.
Yeah, but I also think it's important that people know that there are options to get there. It's not a, you know, conventional code or, you know, the form code. There are ways to kind of incrementally implement it. And if we can do that, it's not as flexible as the developers are asking of us, but it's
Right.
more flexible. And I feel like it's a middle ground. And so I guess my question would be, I don't know if you want to just straw poll vote, should we do these things and move in this direction? And maybe there's a couple of other things that we can do too. And I can tell you those, or we can do the
And
straw
when you say do these things, like let's list what we're talking about, because I think the first thing is looking at the frontage problem. We've got side streets as the front street. You got flexibility. What other things are we talking about? I think that's a good idea. You got unanimous good idea here on the.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's the frontage road, the perpendicular roads.
Yeah.
And then I think another option would be to give more flexibility on the entrances. I think, again, this is very dangerous. I would not give flexibility in terms of window coverage, but because you don't want everybody turning their back in their storage area to the front street, but allowing them to do it on the side that faces the parking lot and still having frontage on the front street. Let's see if I can find an example. It's not ideal, but this is not perfect, but it's still, you know, has that feel and has a sidewalk connection to it. But the entrance is on the side and they don't have enough windows here, and they've got a, you know, a storage door here, which are just an egress door there. And I think that it needs to be full frontage. So I'm kind of hiding that. I'm hiding it from Andy. He didn't see it. But this is a very heavily trafficked highway road. You know, it's.
So are you saying that you like this concept, or that you can have as long as the front is cleaned up and doesn't look ugly and looks like a front, that you can have the side yard and the entrance on the side yard?
I'm saying that's a give that I think we can make in this location. And then, you know, if it ever happens, then it can get modified, but at least that's fairly pleasant to walk along.
Yeah,
And if we require, we mandate the kind of connection of the sidewalk to the sidewalk on the front street, then yes.
And some landscaping along the parking side too, to make it attractive. Yeah, that's okay, as long as if I can have a service entrance in the back, so I don't have to do it right in the front where the main entrance is. Or the
Right.
side main entrance, I can come in the back from a service standpoint.
Andy, the other thing Leslie mentioned is to not compromise on the window requirements, the glass frontage requirements, which we see here being a problem.
Right, no, I'm agreeing, make the front look nice.
Great, great.
And I'll just pipe in that the landscaping has been a big thing that the town has also been, that if we're gonna compromise on this, we wanna make sure that we're requiring really good landscaping in the places where we're compromising on it.
So we did not, I don't know what Kirk did, but 175 is where all the landscaping is. And I don't think we modified it. I think it was pretty good. I do want to kind of go back and look at it in terms of the street trees and all like we just discussed, because I feel like this one's dead.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. And we're probably doing some small amendments to that chapter in relation to this. So, yeah, if we need to discuss that, just let me know.
Okay. So I feel like that, allowing them to use this as a frontage, as long as it's, landscaped and sidewalked and everything, and then allowing the side, and then allowing kind of moving the entrance to the side, should address the majority of the comments. I also think that the minimum 55% frontage is, I do not recommend removing that, or I could be convinced to reduce it down, but I think that part of what you're trying to do is get it to, and it should be measured again along the buildable area and not including side setbacks and such, or buffer areas. But I feel like that is, if you're moving the frontage, then we really need to be looking at how are we going to make sure that it's getting filled in enough to matter. One of the things, if you do have a 200-foot frontage and you've got this, a small building and a gigantic parking lot, what about allowing them to show a future building on the other end?
That's
As a
exactly
phased-
what I was thinking, Leslie. I was thinking of a phased development. So here's the plan. We're gonna build this building first. We need this parking now. Phase 2 is gonna be here, and we're gonna meet that 55% in phase 2.
Huh.
That
I
could
think we
work.
got some interesting gives going on.
Can I ask the annoying planner question of, do we have any way of actually confirming that will happen?
No.
That's a
Great.
good
No,
question.
you won't, but it is developable. It's like approved. So, any building owner or property owner would be like, well, at some other point in time, I can add another building here. That's more income.
Okay, great. No, the way you phrased that helped. I was like, oh, I feel like when we let them put them off, it never happens, but that just shifted it in my brain, so you're all good.
All right, making
Yeah, I
progress.
mean, but I'm not gonna write that into the code,
The second building thing?
the phasing thing. I mean, we
Phasing
have
thing.
set, you can phase your project, but
Well, and that is in the code. That whole thing about that's been discussed. Is it anywhere other than the MPD?
no.
No, gotcha.
Because it's,
But-
I mean, it might be in the site plan submittal section or something like that, but that's part of the creativity that I was mentioning. You know what I mean? It's like, It's just all that needs to happen is you need to sort of shift your brain to thinking about what is our goal here. We're trying to kind of get the street wall going, but we're not going to make you build 2 buildings at this time. You know what I mean? It's sort of like but if you're planning your drive-through so that second building can be built, and you're planning your parking layout and I don't know.
Okay, so we've got 2 things that were on the list. Let's keep going.
So some of the other questions were design related questions. One of them being the roof designs. And I will say that, well, first of all, let me just squash this one right now. I think this was the roof style that Dan was complaining about, which is exactly the same roof that this building has. I don't think that he understood that this is a different plane in between. I mean, intersecting gables makes good sense. I don't know what, do you understand what his complaint was?
Joe, you're better at that than I am.
I'm looking at,
I'd be surprised if Dan didn't recognize that, but it's possible. I don't remember specifically his comment on this.
He said it was poor. I think he said something like it was poor roof drainage or something like that. And I just wanted to nip that one because it sounded terrible. It sounded like we were drawing something that was like completely unfeasible, but in reality, it matches,
Yeah.
So, and there is such a thing as gutters. I don't know.
If you were to put an entrance between the gables, you'd be in real trouble. But yeah, I don't understand that comment.
Okay. So I think Dave, is that right? Dave?
yeah, Dave Holman, yeah.
So his concern, and I feel like a little bit of it is that he's coming at this sort of late in the game.
Yeah.
But a big part of the village building and the other building types was part of kind of that comprehensive plan and taking the character of buildings in along Main Street and folding it into the code. And so that the whole idea of roof types and roof pitches and all of that is very much a part of maintaining the character. I think it's one of the best ways to address it. It's also a really good way to get additional floor in with the half story under the roof, because I have found in lots and lots of places I've done these sort of cottagey, villagey buildings in lots of small towns and villages over the past couple of years, and whereas somebody will not allow a 3-story building, they will allow a 2.5-story building. And so you're getting more space and, potentially more residential units in because of that. So I think it's a key aspect of the code. If you guys think we should change it, we can look into that, but it's a pretty major redo.
I just want to chime in there really quickly, Leslie. I think part of the reason I know that there are other reasons for him to have issues with that. But as we discussed, he's getting that height bonus for doing underground parking. So he's able to get a 4-story building in under our current code. So I think when he looks at this code and sees 3.5 stories, he's like, well, this is going backwards. He's not taking, I think, mentally into account that bonus and that it's only 3 stories regularly. So I think as we discussed, putting that in, that may, because then it becomes 4.5 stories rather than 3.5, because you get that extra story bonus if it stays the same. So I do want to just say to everyone that I think that was part of his concern with
Concern,
that.
yeah.
Was that he was like, it's going down a half story from what I'm allowed to do right now, and that was an issue. Obviously the question still is to you guys if you want to discuss that, the pitching or versus not. I just wanted to put that out there that I think that was part of his issue.
I think the statement was, why are we managing roofs? And I think it just, my point kind of is, they're pretty flexible, but they are a way to kind of maintain the character that was such a big part of the comprehensive plan. But height is certainly another conversation, absolutely, that we should have. So I guess straw poll, do we want to scrap all the roof information, or do we want to keep that as is? And then we'll, still addressing stories.
So where you're
I
on
mean, so-
page,
Oh, I just went to 216 to see where we were with the general building in terms of the heights,
Yeah,
just based on what Sky was saying. But I think all of the kind of the traditional storefront and the village building all have, and I actually think we even simplified the roofs significantly, because I don't know if you remember, but the first draft actually had a separate roofs section and
Mhm.
gave a lot more information, and we kind of culled it all down to just this one line item in each table.
So the question you're asking us is, do we want to keep this as is? Possibly assuming that there was a very specific concern on the part of one person. Around height and underground parking and incentives, and why would you limit that the roof issue actually creates additional space, not constraint. So to leave it, thinking
Yeah,
that the creative part of it had not been explored. And I always look to Joe for this. What do you think, Joe?
Well, I think it's kind of like, I guess a good analogy is I live at Highland Green, which is a community of nothing but gables. And I can put up with that because it also establishes the character. As an architect, I have a problem with defining the only acceptable roof as a pitched roof, but the problem is it opens up a can of worms in terms of less desirable design solutions. And I think, especially for upper, middle, and lower village, I think we need to keep it. It may stifle a creative genius from coming up with a design that would make Topsham stand out in the world of architecture, but I think that's darned unlikely. I think it's a simple way of ensuring consistency of character. And I think that's what, Leslie, you're saying as well.
Yeah, there is flexibility. Like, I didn't say that the roof style had to be gable.
Right.
It could be a shed roof, or you can do flatter parapet roofs in between. There's quite a lot of variety. And in outside the village districts, while these are included, the other buildings have other roof types that can be incorporated. So, I think we didn't, so like, the suburban storefront has, frankly, all of the roof types that I typically put in any of my codes. I sort of defined these as the sort of three, but there's a ton of different stuff that can be done within them, except for no roof, where it's just a box that ends. So that's sort of the ultimate reason for doing the roof types is so that they actually are capping the building with something, but there's quite a bit of flexibility within that.
It's seeming to me that Dave might have not seen the part that says you can do a parapet roof with a general building. I wonder.
And he did admit that he had.
Yes, he
not
had said
had
that
the
he
time
had
to
not
look
read
thoroughly.
everything very well,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
don't think that that's, I'm not maligning his character. I'm
Right.
just wondering if he might have missed that.
Yeah,
We could also add the flat roof if you wanted to as well to the general building, if you wanted to give that flexibility. But
Flat roofs where you get snow is not a smart
yeah,
idea.
smart flat roofs in
Right.
Maine, I don't think
Not a
make
smart
sense,
idea.
even in warming Maine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You still get snow.
Yeah, we still get snow, not a good idea.
I call it that. It could still be sloped.
Yeah.
But it's meant to sort of read as a horizontal line at the eave that extends beyond the building. And so it's just a sort of simple version, but that's neither here nor there.
I feel
Okay.
compelled to say that flat roofs in Maine are not a mistake as long as they're properly designed.
Right, right.
I agree with that too, Joe. Thanks for bringing that up. I'd like to see the flexibility of that as long as they're, built and meet the certain standards. I mean, many buildings in Maine are flat roofed and they work great.
Yeah, I think that makes good sense. I'll add it to the general building. I don't really think there's a reason not to.
Say that again, Leslie. You don't think there's a reason not to? You're
I think,
suggesting
yeah,
that?
I'm sorry, I was writing. The flat roof that we allow in the suburban storefront,
Yeah.
it reads as kind of a horizontal line, and I think it could be fine in the general building. So I think adding it in will give another option that could be, used. And I would hate for somebody to come in and say, oh, I really want to do this, and you guys to say, no, it's not allowed. And everybody kind of push back. So
Gotcha. Are we in agreement?
Right.
Yeah. Sounds like we're agreeing. More flexibility.
The two images that are currently on the screen, I think, are a good example. The brick building is clearly not, doesn't have a traditional, what we think of as being, an historic or traditional roof, but it's a thoughtfully designed building, and in a sense, it's more handsome than the one above it, which has a gable. But is otherwise very undistinguished.
I'm so sorry. I just have to ask this because I'm not an architect. What is the difference between a flat and a parapet roof?
A parapet.
yeah,
Go ahead, Leslie.
no, go ahead, Joe, please.
Well, to me, a flat roof would be one that doesn't necessarily extend over the wall, but basically there's no transition at the top of the wall that calls an end to the building, let's say. And a parapet would extend above a flat roof, at least on the front side, like, I don't want to say a Western false front, but
No, I think I get that. Yeah, I was looking it up, and I'm just actually not understanding. If there's so is flat roofs a lot more desirable than parapet because of less building material needing to be used? I guess maybe that's
yeah, I mean they're typically preferred for commercial buildings because they want to enclose a large amount of floor area, and if you had a pitched roof, it would just be horrendously ugly, unless you went through extraordinary measures to make it complicated enough to be aesthetically acceptable. But basically, a parapet is a continuation of the wall of a building, and the roof intersects it rather than meeting at the top. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
thought a parapet roof could have a flat top. That's what I'm getting at.
So based on what is written, and I'm calling these roof types, I'm sort of naming them. A flat roof with a capital F and a capital R is not necessarily what everybody would consider to be a flat roof, but a parapet roof has this parapet on all the street sides based on the definition in the code. So it's got to have a certain, height for that parapet all the way around. And what happens, to the actual roof, it should be sloped to some degree inside. It could be heavily sloped behind it, or it could be almost flat. And then according to the code, the flat roof has an extended eave. So it's visible from the street that it has this sort of extended eave, but it could be so thick and behind it could be sloped roof that you can't see, but it's sort of reading as this extended flat roof. And it's a very more kind of mid-century look to it. But I have seen it done really well on apartment buildings and things like that. Plus it gives you another option. And again, it's not just a box ending with just a metal flange at the top to keep, water from coming in or whatever.
Once again, the advantage of drawing or an image as opposed to words.
You used to have those images in the code. They used to be in the code, but they were pulled out.
The many
Sorry.
chapters.
Okay, so we're good with leaving the roofs in and adding the flat roof to the general building?
Yes.
Okay. One of the other design questions, which I think is incredibly important, is this idea of the building segments, which I feel like are pretty clearly defined. And shown on all the drawings as different segments and how you can kind of treat them. So what they are intended to do, and part of what Chris was saying about using the traditional storefront, which has no street wall requirement. It does not have a minimum or a maximum street wall requirement on it because it only allows a single side parking. So you can have a big wide open, but you can't do, a tiny building and then the rest parking along the street wall. You can only do one. So it's to your advantage to do more building. So that's why we have the street wall requirement in the suburban storefront. We don't have a limit on the amount of side parking that you can have. And so that's why we have a street wall, is to get at least some street wall in there. So I don't know where he was looking, where he was saying it's only 200 feet, or it requires it to be 200 feet, or we have a 200-foot building and it only lets me do 100 feet or something like that, which wasn't right. And he could have been looking at an old version too. But the traditional storefront in the lower and upper village does not have street wall, but it does have these 30-foot building segments. And the idea is they have to divide the building up, incrementally in 30-foot segments. And it has to be defined by a vertical shadow line only on the ground floor, which is just this. It's not much.
Right.
I don't want to interrupt, but I have to. I've got to sign off. I'll just say that as far as I'm concerned, we ought to leave it as it is. And I apologize for having to leave early.
It's understandable, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're looking at page 2-13? No. What are we
Yes.
looking? Yes?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. Mhm. What
So
time
we're
were we
not-
supposed to go to?
We were really talking about 5:30, so,
Okay,
um,
we're almost done.
are we? Oh,
Mhm.
great.
Well, in my world, but you know,
Yeah, no. So what you're suggesting here is that we stay the course, Leslie, not make a change? That.
I don't
the
think it's
concern-
needed.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
concern that was raised by Chris, we're not ignoring it, but we're saying it's there for a reason.
he was incorrect about the street wall, and I don't know if he understands what the segments are. Because
Uh-huh.
it's pretty limited. It's just not that much. It just means breaking it up along the sidewalk on the ground floor.
So stay the course. Good. Okay, next.
Susan, we can follow up with Chris to explain that too, I think, just.
I think so, yeah.
He may have understood at the end because I think during the meeting, Sky said, I think you're looking in the middle village, and he seemed to kind of understand that. So I think he may realize that, but at any rate,
That it was
I
a
didn't go
false-
back.
Yeah. Okay,
I think you get the village building. Probably.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other sort of big discussion is about those heights, and the underground parking.
Yeah.
And, I didn't realize the Sky when we were talking this morning, but I had actually added this whole attached structured parking section that I forgot that we added.
Yeah.
It got pulled out and got put back in through the process. And so, the code does allow them to do right now basement parking and parking behind occupied building space. And the basements, I think, are defined in the code, and I've got this down on my list to verify, but I believe that you're allowed to have up to 4 feet above grade for the basement to still be considered a basement. So if it's 4 feet above grade, so it's only partially submerged, it must have windows on it, or treatment. Can't just be blank 4 feet of wall. If it's less than 4 feet, if there is a dimension, we call it, I have to make sure, I typically call it a visible basement if it's that tall, and that means that you can really see it, and so you have to treat it. There are smaller increments that it can be above grade that doesn't require the visible basement treatment, which I think is like 2 feet or something like that. So I think that's all taken care of. We are not allowing them to build a whole ground story of parking. So I guess that's a question. Do we lose Rick too?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's recorded, yeah. So.
This sort of idea of the parking extending all the way to the front of the building, I think is not a good idea at all. And so this occupied space is only on the front of the building. It's not on the side of the building. So your side can be partially structured parking exposed. But of course, the corner would be occupied by a building. And so, essentially, this is what you would see, except for the basement, from the side street or from the side view. That said, this doesn't add a story in for structured parking, like your current code, I guess, does. So my question is, do we want to allow that? Do we want to allow it only on specific buildings? Is 4.5 stories okay? So that half story is what's allowing that to be 4 feet above. So this would be 3.5. stories if that's, you know, half above grade, basically.
Opinion?
I do. I think that we should maintain a height bonus for underground parking. Or potentially just structured parking of some sort, because we have it right now. I don't think it's a bad part of our code currently, and it is what is allowing Dave Holman to build the building he wants to.
And that's relatively a new piece of code, is it not? Wasn't that a revision that was a relatively new
It
piece of?
didn't happen
No?
last year, so I don't know when it happened.
Oh, okay.
I've got, you know, a
Yeah.
short tenure.
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I think that it, you know, I definitely don't want parking up to the front. Like just the ground floor is all parking, you know, it's like lattice, you know, I don't want that. I'm not suggesting that. I think that is potentially what is allowed now. So I think by not allowing that, you would be reducing allowances right now. But if you reduced that and this height, I
Bonus?
could see
Yeah.
that hurting some people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's necessary. I think that, you know, maybe we could offer the bonus for basement parking and, you know, some percentage of, you know, in building behind parking, but that isn't one I would choose to get rid of. I think that people might be upset.
So right now, that is not in the draft. Is that right, Leslie? Right. So, and so what does that sound like to you in terms of having a height bonus for providing underground or structured parking?
I would probably allow it in the traditional storefront and the general building, which would be your apartment buildings and, you know, the mixed use sort of traditional storefront. I wouldn't allow it in any other building types, probably. And I mean, I think it just goes to how tall is the community willing to allow it to go? And if your current code is allowing it to be 4 stories, and they've seen that building, has that development been viewed by the public? Have they seen what it's gonna look like? This is the Union Park.
Gone to sketch. It hasn't received final approval. I understand what you're getting at. Our current code allows 60 feet with that bonus, which I think equates to about 4 stories.
Was that 4 stories above ground?
Mhm.
So if you add a garage underneath, the level underneath, you're still 4 stories above ground.
It's an incentive. Cause it's, you know, you end up with less surface area parking, you know, it allows you to get more units in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better
It's a
use
good
of the
idea,
land.
yeah, better use of the
Yeah.
land.
There's reasons we would want to incentivize that in Topsom Fair Mall. Because we have a
Or the
huge,
transitional,
well, at Topsom Fair Mall and the transitional, because we have a huge chloride problem in that stream. And if we can, you know, allow a little bit more height, if people are providing structured parking that doesn't provide salt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would also be good.
Yeah.
And you could build more stuff then.
in the area where
In
we
the
want
area
to
where we
build
want to build
structured
more stuff,
parking.
yeah.
Yeah,
And Crooker, they'll give you more height in Crooker.
any thoughts, Andy?
No, I'm not, this isn't my
Yeah.
area of expertise, I guess. I
But
would
it
have to
sounds like
defer
it's worth
to,
adding.
well,
It sounds-
if it gives flexibility in height, I'm all for it.
There we go.
I mean, I think that it could be good for just any, like even the attached structured parking. I mean, I'll listen to you, Leslie, if you have other opinions, but I think if we can incentivize covered parking in these areas, it's good from a planning perspective and an environmental one. I just closed out a grant in this area to try to reduce chloride that was not that successful. Right. Unfortunately.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a question of whether or not you think the community will push back on the 4 stories, even though it's already in your current code. Do they even really realize that? And if you say it's worth a shot, I think it's worth a shot. I mean, more
do it.
developability just means you'll get more things happening, so.
Let's do it.
I think it's worth a shot, and I think that particularly in relation to that chloride issue I mentioned, that is a compelling reason for the community to have interest in that, and you know, people are saying we're never gonna do structured parking. I don't, you know, can we do anything about, this is a whole nother thing, but you know, everyone keeps saying solar covered, you know, parking too is. Just, we have these reasons to want to incentivize this beyond just planning that I think catches a wider group of people, and I'd like to try if everyone else is okay with that. If the community goes crazy and we're like, this is not happening, we can discuss that, but I think it would be worth trying.
We're okay as far as fire trucks go,
Yes,
height.
Yep.
Then.
Yep.
Why not?
yep, they're totally fine with it. We've already discussed it in relation to Dave's project.
Excellent. All right. Next.
That's all I got.
That's it? All right.
Mhm.
Leslie, how wonderful. Thank you.
Well, I
Thank
don't know. We'll see what the developers think of phase 2, you know, or phase, I don't know what phase this is anymore. But yeah,
But you know, so much of this has actually been asking them to slow down, and because they're so worried and they're so busy, to actually slow down and look at what's
Yeah.
in the code. And, you know, we've made some actual changes today, and I think those changes are positive in terms of flexibility, and that will allow some concerns around street frontage to be addressed. So, you know, we'll see. Yeah. Okay. I think we're a wrap.
okay.
Thanks a
Great.
lot for fitting us in. I know
Yeah.
Thank you
you're
very
busy.
much.
Yeah, thank you. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.